Hey everyone, and welcome. So you're getting ready for the UGC net exam, and you've hit the postmodernism section? I know, it can feel like a total maze. But what if I told you it's actually your secret weapon for a really high score? In this explainer, we're going to take all that confusion and turn it into a clear strategic advantage for you.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to build a rock-solid definition of what postmodernism even is. Then we'll dive into the 5 key theorists whose ideas are, let's be honest, your essential vocabulary for this. After that, we'll open up the literary toolkit so you know exactly what to look for in a text. We'll cover the authors you have to know, and then we'll finish up with some powerful revision strategies to help you absolutely crush this section of the exam.
So where did this whole thing come from? Well, you have to go back to the end of World War II, the absolute horror of the Holocaust, of the atomic bomb. It just shattered that old belief in human progress. This huge sense of disillusionment left the world feeling chaotic and absurd. A new generation of writers felt like the old ways of telling stories were just, well, as John Barth famously put it, exhausted. And that feeling of chaos brings us right to this question. Look, I get it. This topic feels overwhelming. But this whole explainer is designed to give you a clear, strategic framework. By the end, I promise, you're going to see it not as a headache, but as a golden opportunity to rack up those marks. Okay, here it is. This is your exam-friendly definition. Postmodernism isn't just a time period. It's an attitude. It's all about being skeptical of what it calls grand narratives or meta-narratives. You know, those big sweeping stories that claim to explain everything, like religion or Marxism or the idea of scientific progress. Postmodernism says, nah, I don't buy it. It rejects absolute truth and instead kind of playfully jumps into the chaos and fragmentation of modern life. Now this, comparing modernism and postmodernism, is a classic exam question. So listen up. Think of it like this. Modernists were super serious, trying to find some deep meaning in a broken world. But postmodernists, they're playful, they're ironic, they celebrate the idea that meaning is slippery and unstable. A modernist author was like a god, creating order from chaos. A postmodernist author might literally write themselves into the book, winking at you and admitting it's all just a game. To really get your head around postmodernism, we have to know the thinkers who gave us the words to even talk about it. These 5 theorists, they're your essential vocabulary for the exam. Let's meet them. First up, Jean-François Lyotard. If you remember one thing, just one thing about him, make it this phrase. Postmodernism is an incredulity toward meta-narratives. All that means is that we just don't trust those big, one-size-fits-all stories anymore. Postmodern books show this by focusing on smaller, local, often broken-up perspectives instead of some all-knowing narrator who has all the answers. So if Lyotard distrusts the big story, Jacques Derrida distrusts the very words we use to tell it. He's the father of deconstruction, and he argued that language itself is super unstable. Meaning is never set in stone, because words only get their meaning from how they're different from other words. His whole method, deconstruction, is about finding the internal contradictions in a text, the aporia, that prove no single, stable meaning is ever really possible. Then we have Jean Baudrillard, who takes this idea of instability from words and applies it to our reality. He gave us these cool concepts, simulacra and hyperreality. Basically, he argued that our world is so full of images and copies that they've become more real than the original thing. A perfect example is Don DeLillo's novel White Noise, where the characters experience a disaster mostly by watching it on TV. That's hyperreality for you. And you can't really talk about postmodernism without talking about power. That's where Michel Foucault comes in. He showed us that power isn't just about physical force. It works through discourse, these big systems of knowledge that decide what's true and what's normal. So, a lot of postmodern literature tries to fight back against these dominant discourses by focusing on forgotten voices and by treating official history as just one possible story, not the story. And finally, let's bring it all back to the book itself with Roland Barthes. He famously announced the death of the author. He argued that it's kind of pointless to try and figure out what the author really meant. Instead, a text is just this rich tapestry of cultural references, and the real meaning is born when you, the reader, engage with it. This is a perfect example of that big postmodern shift away from a single authoritative truth. Okay, stop what you're doing. This table right here, this is your revision goldmine. It boils down everything we just talked about into a simple, super powerful summary. Seriously, pause, take a screenshot. It's the perfect cheat sheet for matching these theorists to their big ideas. You're going to thank me later. All right, so we've got the theory down. But what does all this complicated stuff actually look like in a novel?
Well, this next section is your toolkit. We're going to talk about the key features you can spot in a postmodern text. These are the techniques you absolutely need to have on your radar. You got fragmentation, where stories jump all over the place. Metafiction, where the book basically tells you, hey, I'm a book. There's pastiche, which is like parody but without the joke. And intertextuality, the idea that all texts are talking to each other. But one of the most important ones, one that gets its own special name, is historiographic metafiction. Pay close attention here, because this is a huge exam point. The term is historiographic metafiction, and the name you have to associate with it is Linda Hutcheon. She came up with it to describe these weird novels that are super self-aware that they're just stories, but at the same time, they're all about real historical events and people. And look, Hutcheon's own words just nail it, don't they? It's this paradox that's at the heart of it. These books aren't trying to tell you what really happened in the past. They're actually questioning if we can ever really know the past, suggesting that history itself is just another kind of story. Definitely remember this quote. It's a high-yield one.
So what does this actually look like? Well, here are the big ones you are most likely to see on the exam. Knowing that a book like The French Lieutenant's Woman or Flaubert's Parrot falls into this category, that is exactly the kind of knowledge that gets you points in those matching questions.
All right, next up, a lightning round. We're talking about the authors and the books that form the high-yield canon for your NEET exam. These are the must-knows.
For the NET exam, the American writers are a huge deal. You have to know these four. Thomas Pynchon, with his super complex paranoid novels. Kurt Vonnegut, who used dark humor and sci-fi in Slaughterhouse-Five to talk about trauma. Don DeLillo, our go-to guy for the hyperreal. And of course, Joseph Heller, whose Catch-22 is just a masterclass in absurdity. But hey, it's not just the Americans. You also got to keep an eye out for British authors like John Fools, Julian Barnes, and Angela Carter. And international giants like Italo Calvino, Salman Rushdie, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez. His work with magical realism is absolutely central to this whole conversation. Okay, we're on the home stretch. This is where we put it all together. Think of this as your last-minute power-up. Pure, high-yield facts for strategic revision. You know you're going to get chronology questions. It's just a fact of life on the NET exam. This timeline gives you the key publication dates you need to know. Knowing that Catch-22 came before Slaughterhouse-Five, and that Lyotard's big theory text dropped in '79, that tiny bit of knowledge can be the difference between getting a question right or wrong. All right, now for those of you who are really aiming for the JRF, this slide is for you. Brian McHale gave us this brilliant way to tell modernism and postmodernism apart. He said modernism is epistemological. It asks, how can I know the world? But postmodernism, it's ontological. It asks a different question. Which world is this? It's all about jumping between different realities, the real, the fictional, the virtual. And of course, there's our friend Linda Hutcheon again, whose work on historiographic metafiction is just fundamental. Okay, get your phone ready because this is another one you'll want to screenshot. Matching quotes to theorists is such a common question format. These four are the big ones you need to have locked and loaded in your brain. Lyotard on metanarratives, Derrida on the text, Jameson on pastiche, and Barth on exhaustion. Know these cold. All right, let's wrap this up with a final challenge, a little pop quiz, just like you'd see on the exam. So why is pastiche so common in postmodern lit? The answer is number 2. As the critic Frederick Jameson argued, pastiche is basically blank parody. See, for parody to work, you need to be making fun of a style by comparing it to some kind of stable norm. But in the postmodern world, that stable norm doesn't exist anymore. All that's left is just imitating old styles without any satirical bite. It's a perfect summary of the whole postmodern condition. Mastering these kinds of distinctions is exactly what will make you stand out on exam day. Good luck with all your prep.